Hello, YouTube world, London, Paris, Washington, Moscow, Minsk, Kiev, Kampala, Nairobi, Bucharest, and all the ships at sea. Hi, it's Tuesday. It's Tuesday Breakdown, and I was told recently, they said, a good friend said, Jeff, you know a lot about completely trivial things. And I said, yep, you do not want to go up against me in Jeopardy, because if it is archaic, useless knowledge, rest assured I have it in me. In fact, I was talking to a buddy yesterday, and somehow we got onto the topic of baseball. I am a huge baseball nerd. And he said, okay, Jeff, who won the 1989 World Series? I said, well, that's easy. Oakland A's beat the San Francisco Giants in the first Bay series. That was the earthquake series. And he said, okay, how many Oakland A's can you name from that team? And I think I got like 8. So, okay, how many Giants can you name from that team? Sure, why not? And he's like, you might be the only person I know who can just pull that out. I said, yeah, I'm not sure it's credit to me. But then, anyway, so that's why just like right now, when I was saying hi and I just started rattling off world capitals, I don't know why I did that. It's because it's there. Hi, Miriam. Yeah, when I did a mic check recently, I counted to 100 by 17s. And somebody's like, why did you do that? I said, I have no idea, because it's there. 17, 34, 51, 68, 85, 102. It's just, I don't know. I don't know why. I don't think it's that I'm smart. I think it's that I retain a lot of stupid things. And there it is. So that is what they call apropos of nothing. I have no point with that. I just thought I'd ramble about that. Anyway, it is 1:02. It is Tuesday Breakdown time, and I'm back in my office. Unfortunately, I do not have the wonderful mountains behind me. I do have a picture of my kids from I want to say that's probably 6-7 years ago. But it's fun. And it is good to be back. It is a little weird today to do a Tuesday Breakdown on a service that I had no part in. I wasn't even on stage on Sunday. I was in the building. I was teaching our Elements new members class, and I had planned on drumming first service, which meant we needed a solution for the rhythm section second service. And when we found out that solution, which was James Marley playing the cajon, the box that he sat on and played, we realized he's got it and he can do both services. And so I had a full Sunday morning of no in-sanctuary responsibilities, which doesn't happen that often. And yes, I did struggle knowing what to do with myself. But it was a good time, and I did watch the sermon from our guest speaker, a free church pastor who served faithfully for 45 years and who has been here at the church now going on 9 years. My dad, Jerry Foote. He was the pastor here in the 70s, for people who don't know that. He was the first full-time pastor Grace Church employed, and he was here from 1972 to 1981. During that time, he had a son who was born on Easter Sunday at Longmont United Hospital in 1975. But I have an older brother and an older sister. I don't know if people know that about me. And so, yeah, a lot of my childhood was here in Longmont. And even after we moved to the Chicago area, we'd come and vacation out here because we were friends with people who are still here in the church today, like the McMurdo family. And we would see them on vacations, and we'd go to Estes Park, and we'd go to church on Sunday at Grace during the 80s. So there's a lot of history between this church and me, even before when I arrived to be the senior pastor in 2012. So it's always a great thing to see him preach here. And it's super special for me, and I think I wanted to let y'all know that it's super special, I think, for Grace to have that happen. And then not just for the nostalgia of it all, but to have him preach a sermon like that, I think was special for everybody who heard it. If you didn't hear it, you need to go back and listen to it. What he did, and I didn't know he was going to do this, and again, this is the beauty of guest preachers, is they will come at a passage completely differently than I would, and it's totally okay. as long as they get the text right, which of course he will, and he did. But he turned it into story time with Uncle Jerry and just hit it out of the park. Did such a better job with not just that particular passage, but the themes of Luke than I certainly could have ever done or even thought of or dreamt of. But the theme of what he brought out was this theme of master servant. What is our relationship with the king? In the kingdom of God, what is the relationship with the king? And how that comes out in the first part of his passage there in Luke 17, which is basically how masters in the kingdom of the world treat their servants and how servants expect to be treated by their masters in the kingdom of this world, which is don't expect anything special. You did your job. Now take care of me again, and then you can go feed yourself. Like that's what servants do for masters. And in my mind, as he's talking about that, or as I studied, I think of like the Downton Abbey, classic British butler maid system. You know, there's the well-to-dos, and then there's the servants. There's the upstairs, there's the downstairs, and the job of the servant is to say yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. And is there anything else I can do for you? And make sure you got your food first, and make sure. So this is how I probably would have presented that text. But then, of course, he made the point that that's not the relationship of the king in the kingdom of God to his servants. The theme verse in Mark is the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. That's, I want to say, Mark 10. And that is clearly described throughout the Gospel of Luke. And I love that my dad was able to kind of piece those things together. And he brought up the master servant from Luke 12, where when the master comes home, if he finds you awake and serving, he will then put on the servant's clothes himself to serve you and put you over a lot of his creation. Whereas the servant in Luke 17 is, I just did what I was supposed to do. I don't get anything new. I don't get anything special. And how the kingdom of God is the first. And when you are served by the king, it creates joy and it creates thanksgiving and thankfulness because it's not what I expected. It's different. And so the leper of the 10 who gets healed, he realizes, I just got served by the king. I better go say thank you. And that theme then bringing out in Luke 15, the prodigal son story as let's imagine what it would be like at the feast at the end of the world, peace. And so that was his sermon. And he spent the second half of the sermon essentially in this, let's tell a story imagining that the end of all things, the inheritance of the new earth, when the kingdom of God comes in fullness and the kingdom of this world is gone forever, and it's a new earth, what will that be like for the servants of the king? And just tracking that through Old Testament imagery from Exodus and Zechariah to the story of the prodigal son to stuff we know in Revelation that's going to happen. And it was so heartfelt and it was so emotional for a lot of people. Including him. And I know that feels like when you're preaching and the depth of what you get to talk about just overwhelms you. And you do get choked up sometimes. And he referenced my mom without saying her name, but obviously referencing his experience of watching her deteriorate in her last days and knowing that there is hope and joy to come for their reunion, but also what she gets to experience now that we hopefully will experience someday soon as well. So those kind of things were very significant to me. He did put in an Easter egg just for me that I don't know if anyone else would know. So I'm going to reveal what that is so you can tell. So there's a series of books that he read to me when I was a little boy. I remember we spent a lot of time in The Hobbit when I was a kid. We had records, the vinyl of an old 77, 78 animated version of The Hobbit. That we had the entire soundtrack on 4 records. And I would play that over and over and over. So those kind of stories, Narnia, I definitely received all those things. I'm realizing as I'm talking right now that my microphone is plugged in, but not in front of my face. Can you hear any of this out there? If you're watching, can you just let me know if you can actually hear what I'm saying? Because all of a sudden I'm having this moment of, I don't see any audio. Okay, thank you, Miriam. You can hear me, so I'll keep talking. I just had one of those like, oh no, have I been talking for 10 minutes and nobody can hear a thing? So anyway, thank you, Miriam. I'll keep talking then. So along with the Hobbit and Narnia books, there was a series of books that my dad read to me when I was a little boy called the Chronicles of Prydain, Prydain. And the author's name is Lloyd Alexander. And it's 5 fantasy novels. Disney made a movie out of the second one, and it was a terrible movie for Disney, and it was a terrible rendition of the book called The Black Cauldron, and I can't recommend the movie to anybody. But I can recommend those 5 books as just brilliant kids' books about how story works, how heroism works, and there's a lot of connective tissue to biblical principles. I don't think Lloyd Alexander is a Christian. He wasn't. It's not like Narnia where it was a whole allegory. But it told the story about this guy named Taran, who was an assistant pig keeper. That was his job. And he dreamt of being a hero. He wanted to be, the sword-wielding hero who saves the day, but he was a pig keeper. And through the adventures, he met this girl who was his age, who was, turns out was a princess, but she was not very formal. She was kind of rough around the edges, and their relationship was always fun because she was this strong-willed person. He was kind of meek and mild, but had these big dreams. And they met different characters along the way. And not to give away too many spoilers, but the last book is called The High King. And because he's the hero of the whole series, you can pretty much guess his end result. But to get there, he had to go through all these adventures and learn what everyone in the kingdom had to deal with, and he became a great king. But he was an assistant pig keeper, and that's what they kept calling him. So anyway, in the sermon, when my dad was talking about the prodigal son coming back, he actually threw in the phrase, the assistant pig keeper is back, but he's really my son. And, that was really significant to the story of Taran in those books. It was really significant to the prodigal son, but you can understand why it'd be significant to me as well, because obviously in reading those books to me, he wanted me to grow in the sense of meaning in my life, in the sense of how to be a good leader by the adventures this guy went through, and that whole, you might be an assistant pig keeper now, but that doesn't mean you won't be great someday. But even if you are great someday, don't forget that you're an assistant pig keeper at heart, and that's an okay thing to be. And so all of that is just kind of part of my story, identity, DNA that my dad passed on to me as a child. So to hear him say that in a sermon about the relationship between father and child and the value that God the Father puts on us as his children, and you can connect those dots. That's why it hit me the way it did. And I know for everybody in that room, there was something that hit them. So feel free to chime in on your thoughts of that. I think it's good for a church to hear different voices of preachers. My first church I served in when I was a music pastor for all those years in the 90s had 2 senior pastors. Now, I'm not saying that's what we should do, but it was a unique thing, and everybody told them it'll never work. But it was really cool to be in a church where it's kind of like, okay, if this guy's preaching, then it's going to sound like this because he's more of a bottom line kind of guy and he's very businesslike, and that's a good thing. But then if the other senior pastor's preaching, he was more of the storyteller, kind of the easygoing heart guy. And it was really cool as a church to they were almost like a 2-to-1 ratio. The storyteller did 2, the business guy did 1. But you'd walk in, you'd be like, well, which week is it this? Oh, he's up there. Okay, that'll be good. And we tried to do that with the music ministry as well. I didn't lead every week. I trained up leaders to rotate, which is one of the things that we are doing here at Grace, where we have a rotation of leaders, because I think it's important to hear different voices, to get different perspectives and styles. So yes, I love preaching, and I am a little hesitant to give the pulpit over to people. But if I know they're going to be great, and I know they're going to do it differently than me, even if I'm related to the guy, he's going to do it differently than me. I learned how to preach by watching him, but I don't preach like him. Although maybe you saw similarities, or maybe you heard different turns of phrases or tone of voice for sure. I mean, if back when people would talk on the phone instead of just text on the phone, My brother, my dad, and I could confuse just about anybody on which one of us they were talking to. And now my son, who's 18, uh, will totally sound like me if you hear him on the phone. Thank you, Miriam listed all 5 of the books: The Book of Three, The Black Cauldron, The Castle of Liar, Turan Wander, and The High King. Phenomenal books, just great. And I've gifted them to some people at Christmas who have young kids. I don't know if they do anything with them, but those are as formative to me as the Lord of the Rings and the Narnia books. So that's my recommendation for you on those. But yeah, Sunday was very good from that perspective. There were some hiccups because we're still in this weird transition of online to in person. And we did the pre-service for a while, but we stopped doing that after Easter for a variety of reasons. But then it's kind of like, okay, who's leading off the services? Is it the music leader? Is it the elder? Are there announcements? Where are we putting the announcements? So some of those things are still forming. And I'm really super thankful that James was able to sit in on the cajon and that Quentin was able to take over the leadership. And Carissa's back. I don't know if you saw that. She was playing piano, and it's great to have her back. She was back in our staff meeting today, which is really good because Tanya needs a break. Tanya and Joe have been amazing throughout COVID and into this year. And I know I said that from the stage last Sunday, but amazing. And they need a well-deserved break. So since we had some health issues go through the musicians, we've kind of had a skeleton crew, but they've done great. And I'm just really proud of the family of musicians we have here. But we always need more. And if you are a musician and want to be a part of it, we'd love to have you. If you know musicians, we'd love to know that. If you just want to pray for more musicians, that's probably a great thing you could be doing so that we can, again, bring that back up to speed where it was before COVID hit. So the coming Sunday, the next passage for me will be finishing up Luke 17, which is a pretty intimidating passage. It's all about the kingdom of God versus the kingdom of this world and what it'll actually be like when they're not sharing the same space like they are right now. And so there's some end time stuff in there. There's some passages people look at and try to fit into their end times theology. And so I'm really looking forward to that sermon, but I'm also really looking forward to the breakdown next week of that sermon, because there's certain things that I don't think are in this passage that other people really think are in this passage. That's a little spoiler. Roberta says, I appreciate the way Jerry brought in the full scope of the story of the Bible from Luke 17 passage. Yeah, like the Blake poem, to see a world in a grain of sand. Yeah, I thought that's really what he did brilliantly, that again intimidated me because I thought I wouldn't know how to do that, but he just knocked it out of the park of saying, okay, this is a story you probably have heard about the 10 lepers and the one that comes to say thanks and the 9 that didn't. And yet there's a whole sermon there for sure. And honestly, I kind of expected that's what he was going to do. But instead, he used that as a launching pad to tell the thread of the gospel throughout all of Scripture, and in particular, the relationship of God to us, to his creation. And it is in there. It's not like he twisted the story of the leper at all. It has been in a thread in Luke. He's not forcing anything that Luke hasn't been trying to get us to grasp already. He simply followed that thread through Luke and realized, oh, this thread goes through Zechariah too. Oh, this thread goes through Exodus too. Oh, this thread goes through Revelation too. And when I say he realized that, trust me, he knows that. And he did that on purpose. It wasn't like he had an aha moment in this leper story of like, oh, I can tell this now. No. You think I know a lot? I started this whole thing about how I retain a lot of trivial information. I could tell you, who was the rookie of the year in the National League in 1989, because I remember that it was Jerome Walton. But he knows this stuff that's important and retains it all. And I'm sure I picked some of that up from him, the ability to kind of say, oh, that's just like in Jude where it talks about false teachers, or that's just, like in Judges when Gideon and the fleece happened. My brain does that, but he's got, 30 some years on me and has been doing ministry, and he loves story. He loves the storylines in the Bible. And kingdom might be his favorite storyline in the Bible. So I'm glad you guys all got to experience that. I never take for granted that I am the beneficiary of that as his son. He and I used to, and we still do, but we used to have theological debates that would go into the wee hours of the morning, and my mom would just be like, will you guys stop and go to bed? And it wasn't like we were trying to win an argument. It was just fun for us because we communicate on that level. And it is fun to see how he's shifted some views over the years. And obviously, I've been taught by him on these issues. And even when we disagree, it's fun. So those are people who have been in the Romans class. He and I have kind of alternated the teaching of that class based on if I have to be somewhere else on a Wednesday night. And clearly, he's a slam dunk substitute. And I'm sure there are people in that room that'll be like, why can't he teach every week? And maybe he could. But like when we did Romans 9, which is a very famous passage in the debate about election, he and I have different views on some of the things, on some of the interpretations of certain verses in Romans 9. And so we presented that chapter together. And it wasn't divisive or challenging. It was just, I think that it means this. And he says, yes, but don't forget that. And it was great. And we got to cover those different facets. Then we get into chapters 10 and 11, where we agree pretty specifically on things that are debatable. And so that's also fun to be like, okay, I think this, but I know I'm not crazy because he also thinks this. And I trust his perspective. So even when he's wrong, I'm okay with it. But when he's right and I'm right, because I'm always right, it's fun. It's fun to be like, okay, I know who to call if I get pushback on this because he has thought about this. And I know I can trust his perspective. So I don't underestimate how valuable that is and how rare that is to have in a parent father-son relationship. So yeah, it's 122. I could keep talking about my relationship with my dad. You really should go back and watch that sermon. It was one for the ages if you haven't seen it or heard it. But I also want to make time for other things that we might want to talk about. I'm getting good feedback via email and even cards. I got a great card from Debbie Noel. She sends me nice cards, and this came today, thanking me for these breakdowns and updates. So hi, Debbie. Thank you for this. These are great pick-me-ups and great encouragements. But a lot of the feedback was, we really liked the backdrop last week. Can you go to the mountains more often? And I think if the people say that that should be part of my job, I am willing to make that a part of my life. I really am. I know, suffering for Jesus, to go into the mountains. Actually, I don't know how we could really do that. It really worked there because I actually had a room. I was, on the balcony of the place that Abby and I were staying. So, but if I just drove up to Estes, this might be a little awkward to sit in a coffee shop and make everybody around me. I don't know. But I do like the idea of let's be creative with this time and give people different perspectives sometimes, even of what's going on in the background. So thank you for the encouragement on those. And, last week I talked a little bit about my anxiety issues and what it felt like. And I definitely want to tell more of that story too. I just don't want to do it every week. But maybe in the coming breakdown, I'll tell a little bit more about what I went through and what the way out of it was for me, because there's some pretty valuable things there as well. Couple things just to mention church-wise that came out of our staff meeting this morning. Ali wanted me to make sure I told everybody, if you're watching a YouTube video and you go to the options of the video you're watching, you can have it auto-translate, where you'll get subtitles in any language that they're willing to do, which means if you want to watch a Grace Latino service, you can do it and it'll subtitle it in English for you. Or if you want to learn Spanish like I'm trying to do right now, and you can watch a Sunday service or any YouTube video and have the Spanish closed caption on that, it'll do that for you. And that's another way we really want to integrate between the two congregations, Grace Latino and what we're doing. Somebody asked me, they're like, oh, so you have a Spanish church meeting in your church? I said, no. We have one church. We have 3 services on a Sunday. 2 are in English, 1 is in Spanish. 2 are at 10 o'clock, 1 is at 8:30. We're one church. We have 1 women's ministry, we have 1 children's ministry, we have 1 deacon board, 1 elder board, 1 membership roster. Some of them, Spanish is their native language. That's how we're trying to operate with this. So anything we can do to encourage people who go to the Spanish-speaking service to keep up with what's going in the English service or vice versa, we want to do that. And so I just thought on Ali's recommendation, I would pass that on to you guys. It is great to have Carissa back. As I said before, Pastor James will be back in just a couple weeks. I think his first Sunday back in May is going to be the 15th, 16th, 2 Sundays second. Yeah, so 16th will be his first Sunday back. So even though we've gone through a reduction of people, we're definitely in a phase where new faces are coming every Sunday, where new staff, by which I mean staff who've been on breaks, will be coming back. And then John Gardner should be here July 1st. So a lot of that stuff is going really well. And we did have 2 funerals this weekend, which also was a benefit to me to not be the preacher on Sunday, because I gave a message on Saturday and a message on Monday, 2 different funerals. But the Lord was a big part of those as well. What came out of my mouth in my message yesterday at the funeral was not what I had written. It was just one of those moments of, I think I'm going to talk about this. And then maybe 2 minutes before I got up while the slideshow was happening, I just had this sense of, no, you need to go to this verse. You're going to talk about this verse. And so I prepared this thing. So on Saturday, I did the message from Hebrews chapter 2, because that's what Sid had requested for Nancy's funeral. And I'd never done Hebrews 2 at a funeral before, but it I thought went really well. And so in my mind, I thought, well, I don't want to have to write 2. So I guess I'll kind of do a little bit of a different spin on Hebrews 2, but I'll stay in Hebrews 2. And then during the slideshow on Monday, during the funeral, it was just like, nope, you are going to talk about 1 John. He who has the Son has life. He who does not have the Son of God does not have life. So I borrowed a couple of illustrations from the Saturday message, but it was a completely different message than what I had intended to do up until about 120 seconds before I stood up there. And I know this is kind of the confessional time. Those are fun when they work, and they're terrifying when they don't. But similar to my dad being able to just kind of talk about the kingdom and find that whole world in that little grain of sand, I don't know. If I get the chance to talk about the gospel, it's like the synapses fire every time. And it just comes out, and I feel good about it because I know it's the gospel and I know I'm getting it right. And the Spirit wouldn't have caused it to come out of me that way unless somebody in the room needed to hear it that way. And that's just fun. There is a joy in that ride that is, I mean, it's like whitewater rafting. And, you know, there's times where you're just kind of enjoying the scenery and everything's going as planned. And then, okay, here come the rapids. Are you ready? And sometimes as a preacher or as a musician, if you're in front of people, you get into those rapids and it's invigorating. There's a thrill to it that is really fun to be on that ride, to realize I'm here, I got my head on a swivel, but I'm not sure I'm in any control of where this is going, but it sure is fun. And I had that experience yesterday in the funeral. So that was really good. And it goes back to that idea of the one you write isn't always the one you communicate, and it isn't always the one people hear, but there is a joy in that process. And I think if I'm going to tie a bow on this, it's whatever gift you are gifted in spiritually, you're going to find that joy. I don't find that joy in some other things that other people do because it's not my gift. So I view myself, I think I have 2 spiritual gifts. One is preaching and one is faith. And those are the ones I have right now. I may get others in different times. When it comes to music, that's more of my identity. That's who I am. I was kind of born speaking that language. And I've put an effort into all of those things. But I think the preaching is a spiritual gift. Maybe it's developed by the family I was born into. And again, talking about my relationship with my dad. And I do work hard at it. But those moments are clearly the Spirit is empowering a gift He's given. And if you haven't experienced it, I highly recommend it. And in whatever area you're gifted in, whether it's teaching or hospitality, or, I mean, the ladies who helped with the funerals, amazing. To be able to put that kind of stuff together on short notice and make those receptions work well, and their attitude while they're doing it. And I'll bet if you talk to one of those ladies that say, yeah, there's a joy in those moments where it does kind of feel like whitewater rafting, but I love doing it and I feel that joy. So if you can get yourself into those situations, enjoy the joy, which again, it was the main idea of the sermon my dad preached. Do we know how to enjoy the joy that comes from knowing Christ? Good discipline there. Instead of disciplining ourselves to make us feel bad and push through things we don't like, let's discipline ourselves to enjoy joy and to enjoy what is his generosity and his wonderful, loving gifts that he gives us as a father. And that's hard for us. So that's a good encouragement from him. And I think that's where I'll wrap up today, is to encourage that from me to you. And I'll take that encouragement and try to enjoy what the Lord has me to enjoy today. And so should you. So thanks for checking in. Thanks for listening to these and enduring my rambling on Tuesdays. I will be back Thursday for the regular, shorter update video. Thanks again for the encouragement that is coming my way. Make sure to encourage somebody today. It's in almost every book of the Bible, the implication, if not the outright command, to encourage one another, because people need it and you need it. So I want to encourage you. You're awesome. And the Lord loves you more than you could possibly imagine. So have a great day with that knowledge. Thank you.